Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, CEO of SpyderWorks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Natasha Sharma, founder of NKS Therapy, educator, and a TEDx speaker. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Natasha Sharma, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
So Natasha, I was reading a little bit about what you've got online. It said, cope with life challenges, create more calm, and reveal the masterpiece that is you. And Natasha, I got to tell you, after 2 years of pandemic, all the global unrest and maybe some more economic unrest, I look in the mirror and I do not see a masterpiece.
Mm,
How do we get there?
I, I hear you. And I really mean it when I say that, because it is so hard to be fine and well when the world around us is just not.
So, what are a few of the things that you would say to people on not just how to cope, but how to get up in the morning and be energized? In this really sort of it's a shaking moment for all of us.
Yeah. I think we have to focus in on ourselves and our own inner world and the smallness of that. And that is not selfish in any way. And I know that one of the trends that I see in young people or younger people than myself, and I didn't quite grow up with this sort of culture. I was born and I was raised in the 80s, from the 80s up, and we didn't really have this sort of what I call it weight of the world syndrome. We
Mhm.
just missed that. And it was people, yeah. And so a lot of young people, or even, older people can carry that weight of the world's problems around. And what we really need to understand is that that is not helpful. That actually immobilizes us in creating the kinds of small changes that we would like to have. And we don't need to make change on these grand scales. So what we really, where we really start creating positive change in the world at a large level is right with the very tiny things we do in our own lives every day, starting
Mhm.
with taking care of our own self and our own physical health. And that then extends to the next nearest people in us, in our lives, like our friends, children, spouse, people we're in relationships with, and work, etc. And then that begins to expand out from them to, and so forth. And so that's kind of what I would say as a sort of a summary of what I would recommend there.
Okay. And in that, you mentioned physical fitness, but I was listening to a really wonderful TEDx talk that you delivered, and you were speaking a lot about emotional fitness. So, what does it mean to be emotionally fit?
Yeah, it's such a great question because it's more relevant, in my view, than ever before. And we've always been emotional. And I don't think the way in which humans operate emotionally has never really changed. But the need and the environment around us, or the environment around us, has changed a billion times fold, since we've been on this planet. And what emotional fitness really is starting with the ability to identify and name emotions. It's a really small, simple thing, but that is the first aspect of what emotional fitness is. Can you name a wide range of emotions? And the second thing is, can you identify what you yourself are feeling at any given moment in time, particularly when we're having really strong reactions to things like anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, or even the positive emotions, so extreme happiness or joy, pleasure. Can we identify those specific feelings? in the moment we're feeling them and what caused them. And that's sort of the third part is, so in addition to being able to name and understand which emotions are what, being able to identify what we feel. And then the third thing is how we got to feeling that way, which is understanding our thought process, our attitudes, our personality, and those kinds of things. And that really is what I think constitutes emotional fitness, with, I would add a fourth aspect, being able to manage and regulate those emotional responses so that we can relate to other human beings in the way that we want.
And so as you're talking about that, and I hear the word fitness, I mean, I think of physical fitness, obviously, a little bit. And I think of whether it's a trainer or a physiotherapist, they will give you some simple exercises in the gym to do. Are there certain things that we should be doing or we could be doing just generally to support ourselves in our emotional fitness?
Absolutely. So just as you point out, fitness is really the idea of getting stronger at something. And the more we flex those skills or muscles, the stronger they get. And for emotional fitness, there are exercises such as sitting. I actually did this with my sons just last night. And I want to do more of this. I've done versions of this with them, but this was the first time we actually sat down with my phone open and like just so we could jot down. And I sat with them and said, tell me all the emotions that you can think of. And what was interesting is they started coming up with a lot of emotions, but also traits, things that aren't feeling like I feel sleepy or like I feel, yeah, I can't remember what they said, but like, so we were able to differentiate between traits or states of being and emotions. So just an exercise like that, sitting down and naming, like doing a brain dump of as many emotions as you can think of, because there's dozens and dozens. And as I said, taking a journal or just making a documentation of what you feel in moments where you're distressed in particular. So we all feel it. We all get distressed. We all get reactive, and things get under our skin, and you know, our feathers get ruffled, knickers in a knot, and all that. So when that happens, it's really useful to practice pulling out paper and pen, your phone, whatever. Stop for a second, close your eyes, breathe, and ask yourself, "What am I feeling right now?" Just name the feeling. That's it. And feelings are one word. They're always one word. If you've gone over one word, it's a thought or a perception. So
Okay.
those are two things that people can do to flex those emotional fitness skills.
Very cool. Thank you for that. I've never thought about it in that one way of the singular word. I think that's really interesting, actually.
Mhm.
Um, so something that's more than one. Something you also mentioned, and I know it's been written up in Psychology Today, et cetera, the notion that we have about what 35,000 or potentially 35,000 or make 35,000 decisions each day, and I believe those are guided by emotion predominantly. How in the world do we get to 35,000, and what role does emotion actually play in that?
So I don't know if that figure of 35,000 is like, you know,
Yeah.
100% accurate, but the point is that we make many thousands of decisions. But just to make a correction, most of them are not emotionally driven. Most of them are actually autopilot. Like literally,
Okay.
we're not even aware of these decisions that we're making. How could we possibly be aware? Like we'd fall over and dead by 9:01 a.m. Right? Like it's
Mhm.
not possible. But where we have larger decisions or more significant decisions, so the higher up the totem pole the decision goes, the more emotionally invested we are into it. So we, you know, the kinds of common decisions we make in the day. What are we going to wear? Right? What will we eat? These are pretty common things that we will decide on. Very low effort, right? Very low, still probably highly emotionally driven, but
Right.
low effort, like low
Mhm.
stakes. But when we do have very large decisions, things that don't come along very often, such as I'm going to buy a house, or I'm going to consider dating this person exclusively, or what have you, or maybe I'm going to apply to this school for that program, or take that job, or whatever it is, move to that city. These decisions are highly emotionally driven. So the bigger the stakes on the decision, the more emotional we are about them. And that's not to say that we shouldn't, of course, think things through and be rational and consider, the kinds of logical reasoning behind them. But in the end, I firmly believe how we feel emotionally will win out in terms of how we make the decision.
And how do we deal with a lot of wicked problems or challenges? Those are challenges where you have incomplete information. So you are looking to make a decision and it's not a straight line. Like in math, we figure out what X and Y are and we give it to the teacher and we get a good grade. With wicked problem solving, we don't have a straight line. We have to make assumptions. We have to make decisions that can be very uncomfortable to us. So how do we manage that? Because that, to me, there's a lot of emotion tied into the process, but also into our own ability to deal with, or inability to deal with, ambiguity and stress.
We're not a fan of that. We dislike, and by we I mean humans, dislike ambiguity. We dislike uncertainty. Pardon me. And we don't like that. And in fact, most of our behavior is geared towards minimizing that as much as possible, whether we're aware of that or not. And right now, as you say, we're living in quite a high period of uncertainty and ambiguity. Not, I wouldn't say the highest in the history of the world, but pretty high. And like in terms of recent history. And what we need to be able to do is have a good sense of acceptance of that. And that's really what it comes down to, is that we need to accept whatever level of uncertainty and ambiguity really does exist that we don't have control over. Fighting against that and trying to get control where we don't have it or can't have it is futile, anxiety producing, creates bad decisions, any kind of emotion that or anything that produces negative emotions in us will lead to poor decision making, right? So just accepting what we can't control and focusing what we can control, focusing on that and only that, helps to minimize or compensate for that lack of certainty that we crave, and make the best decision that we can in that moment. And understand that we will make decisions that don't work out. That's part of life. That's part of being a human. We will make decisions that don't go the way we planned. We'll make decisions thinking that it was the right thing to do at the time, and years later scratch our heads and wonder how we made that decision, or have great insight. I would argue a lot of first marriage is like that. You might make a decision thinking all this stuff on your wedding day, and then come 10, 15 years, 4 years later, be like, So, I think that we have to do the best that we can with where we're at in life, with the tools that we have, and know that it is completely okay if that decision's reevaluated down the road.
As you talk about that, and you talk about the difficulty making decisions, I think, one of the analogies that I use very often with businesses or with our teams is, if you've hit the ball in baseball 3 times out of 10, you get a 300 average and go to the Hall of Fame. And that's from hitting it 3 out of 10 times. And I think we all have to get used to the fact that even of the greatest athletes, the greatest whoever, are only doing the great things a fraction of the time. And I think that, we've come to, we just define failure as anything that doesn't go exactly to plan. And unfortunately, that is going to be the majority of times. And somehow we have to learn to take a deep breath and accept that.
That's absolutely true. I like the analogy of the Baseball Hall of Fame, because the way we live now, in my view, is very unnatural. Like there's so much about the way we live right now And I don't mean just in the technological and information age. I mean like in I mean like in the last 400 or 500 years, but that's like a really big landscape.
Hmm.
We don't live in ways that are very natural. And one of the biggest things that make it seem like we're supposed to be hitting it out of the ballpark each and every time is the information age, is the access to everybody's grand slam at any given moment.
Hmm.
Nobody posts the other stuff, right? They only
Hmm.
post their grand slam. So when we're exposed to that 24/7, it conditions us to believe that, yeah, that's what I need to be doing. That's what a normal life is like. I got to hit it out of the park every day. It's just not natural.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that if I'm quoting or heard it right, I mean, our brain is challenged to process at speeds required today, in the sense of, with the pace of change, with the number of decisions that are being made, it's just challenging to keep up.
It is, and I don't know that there's a full picture of what impact that's had on a sort of very holistic level or meta level. But absolutely, the pace of our environment, the pace of the world around us is exceptionally fast. And our processing speed, which is a cognitive measure of how quickly we can understand and make meaning out of that environment, and um, assign like value to that world, is
Hmm.
still about the same. It hasn't changed. Like, we're very kind of prehistoric in that regard. So I think we see some of the ramifications of that, the anxiety that people experience, the stress. It's not necessarily from working so many hours or the physical expenditure. It's that too, but I think it's the mental processing that is exhausting people, that is creating that anxiety. There's just too much coming at us all the time, but you can control that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's funny because, I mean, this is a very different topic area, but with businesses, with organizations, there's so much fear and so much discussion around automation versus augmentation, and artificial intelligence, and it's not actually intelligence yet, but that's a totally different show. um, for me, this is just wonderful, because I think it lets people, and including myself, focus on a certain amount of processing or certain type of processing. And I think that some of the calculation, and that's probably not the right word, that a computer can do for us, the research it can do for us, it just frees us up. And instead of fighting it, I think we need to embrace what the new world or the new technologies can provide to us as human beings, and use that to work a little bit less, but tackle those wicked problems, tackle those emotional decisions.
I completely agree, and I know that you know that I teach at Conestoga College, college students,
Mhm.
and the course that I teach is information systems and data and technology. And there's a lot we cover in the course that is about some of the downsides of technology, certainly disinformation and misinformation, which otherwise known as fake news and deep fakes. Those are an issue. Platforms that are unregulated, where people are able to freely say what they want, is a human right. Well, we have to step up our game as critical skeptic thinkers. That's really what we are, the regulators of the public forum. It's not going to be some entity outside of of us, the public, right? But I agree with you. The upsides, except for social media, I don't see a lot of benefit there, I'll be honest, but I see a lot more harm. However, social media aside, the benefits of technology and what we have far, far outweigh any cons. If only we could be strong enough to manage the technology and not let it
Mhm.
manage us. Because as you say, we have all these solutions to make things faster and more
Yeah.
efficient, and we should have more free time. But what did we do? We just piled on more stuff. And yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, and I'm of the age that we remember technology's promise being the 4-day work week, and we are
Right.
still waiting. as an entrepreneur, I've learned that I'm free to work any 7 days a week I choose. So I am still waiting for the other
Exactly.
side of it. And Natasha, tell us about NKS Therapy, which you founded.
Yeah, so it started off it was just me, myself, wasn't really named NKS. It was, I don't even remember. It was just me in a back room, just starting out as a therapist. Um, yeah, and it was just, I started on the side. I was working for a couple of psychologists in Toronto for a number of years, and then just started doing my private therapy on the side. For me personally, what I've learned, and I did struggle with this, I have to be honest, because I started my business at a time when entrepreneurship and the hustle culture and the, um, like startup become, get the seed funding and crowdfunding and just be bigger, bigger, bigger and better. That narrative
Mm-hmm.
was around me constantly. And
Mm-hmm.
I swallowed it up. Like I very much sort of was influenced by the Kool-Aid if I didn't completely drink it. And I struggled a lot with myself as I grew NKS because I thought that I was the kind of person that wanted a big, giant 50-person, 100-person, 200-person, like I thought I wanted to be BetterHelp, right? Well, what
Mm-hmm.
BetterHelp was didn't exist then, it does now. I don't. I realized that it took some self understanding and some self awareness that I'm actually quite content with, 15 or a team of 10 to 15 associates. And like, really, that works for me. So I did grow it up to that. And I will say that the pandemic did play a pretty pivotal role in that growth because I was raising my kids at the time that I started. So it was very slow, very organic. Again, not very a hustle. I call it lazy entrepreneurship. That's kind of what I was doing.
Mm.
And then the pandemic came and we had to move online, right? And then we stayed online. But that, of course, made scalability and accessibility being what it is. So NKS did grow into what it is today. But I'm quite happy where it's at today, which is interesting. I don't know if maybe people can relate to that. It's nice to know where you want to
Yeah.
stop as well.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's, I've founded, built, and exited a number of companies in my entrepreneurial journey. And I think it's really critical. And it's not something I knew, 20, 25 years ago. But what was important to you and the size and relationship that you have with your business. And there's a wonderful book. It was written quite a while ago by Bo Burlingham, or co-authored by Bo Burlingham. The I think it was a founder or co-founder of Inc. magazine, and Small Giants or Little Giants, I think it was called, and it's about making that concerted decision of what size you want to cap at. So what you're saying is it's really important to entrepreneurs out there to understanding you got to take a step back and figure out what you want to achieve, what you want to deliver with your
And
business.
and that comes down to
Yeah.
who you are as a person and what you want your life to look like. And there's no right or wrong answer there.
Yeah. Well, and it changes because I mean, when I started out, when I was in my late 20s and had one of the fastest growing companies in the country in manufacturing, we grew up quickly. We had, the end hundreds of employees, and that was all good then. When I exited, it was all good. Now, no. I'm I'm a little older than you,
Totally.
I think, and it's just not having the impact that we do is wonderful, but no, I don't need to do it with 50 million employees. It's
No,
not a
you're
goal.
so right. You're so right. I started NKS when I was, so like 30, I want to say 35, 34, 33, 34, 34, somewhere in my mid 30s. And I very quickly had two kids afterwards.
Mhm.
That changes everything. It influences everything. Versus had I started NKS because I entered the field of psychology and I did my degrees in education as a sort of almost like a second career. Like I was in the corporate world for 4 or 5 years and I was like, oh no, that's not going to work for me. And then went back. So I had a very late start. But to your point, Had I started at like 24, 25, like the people I know in my field, some of my colleagues,
Hmm.
could have been a very different story. You have the energy then, you have
Yeah.
a whole different view on life at that year, at that chapter of your life, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that self-understanding completely critical.
Mhm.
Um, so what's a kindness journal?
Also, oh, the kindness journal is I guess it's like a workbook, I think, in its core, but it is a guided journal where you're prompted, meaning it's not a blank page journal. So, which is really nice. It's nice to sort of have the consistency of answering the same questions every day. And that's really what it is. It's something you fill in before you go to sleep, ideally. And I like that because it's a way to wind down and not be on the phone before going to sleep. But it's also a mechanism to insert a certain line of thinking before your head hits the pillow and you sink into, like, hopefully, some of the most interesting subconscious times of your 24-hour day, right? So, what do you want to plant in there right before you go into that? So, it basically is a journal. I have learned, okay, in my life, it took me a long time to learn this, but I have learned that being a nice person and your character is very, very important. And, it's funny, today's International Women's Day, and I was having conversations with, I think, my mom yesterday and like a few people. And I remember, I think one of the lines I said was like, one of the things we need to teach our daughters and our sons, but like our daughters, just in the vein of International Women's Day, um, is to choose a nice guy in your partner.
Hmm.
Choose a nice man. Forget this narrative of like a rich man, a lawyer, a doctor, a tough guy, whatever. Like, what we realize, I think, sometimes too late, is you choose a nice person, whether you're choosing a woman or a man, like everybody, not just men. And I have two sons, and I wanted to raise boys who are emotionally fit, okay, because men and boys, this is not a gender thing, this is just very much a social thing, because boys and males are um, born with the exact same emotional skill set for the most part as we are, but they are conditioned rapidly. They have been conditioned out of that. Like, they've been taught a lot of suppress your emotions, don't show them, don't. They've been taught the anti-emotional fitness, like that's not what men do. And as a result, a great many of them born before I would say 2010 struggle with emotional fitness for that reason, whereas women
Hmm.
don't struggle with that. So the kind back to the kindness journal, I really wanted a way to, and I think I say this right in the beginning of the first page, is that I really wanted, it was inspired by wanting to raise really nice boys into nice men, and I thought, well, I have to continuously model that myself too. So I created this journal about kindness, self-respect, and gratitude, and uh, niceness, not pushoverness, not at all, but being a kind, self-respecting person. And that's really what it is. It's to train ourselves to think and behave in ways that are consistent with that goal.
Natasha Sharma, NKS Therapy, as our time starts to wind down on Say Hi to the Future today, one last question for you. You've been working on the Emmy nominated series Hoarders for the past year. What is that like? I mean, I haven't, I'm not a religious watcher of it, but boy, that's a different show.
It's so nice to be able to talk about Hoarders. It was this huge secret of all of us who have been involved in the show for so long, and it just premiered on Make Full last weekend on Saturday. So it's like I can freely talk about it to whomever I want, and I can totally answer this question. And in short, it was phenomenal. For those who are familiar with the US version, it is, I can't remember, I think it's over 8 or 9 seasons, maybe more. but it's I think it might be like over 10 seasons. It's really popular, clearly. And I think one of the best aspects is that to take a very compassionate and very educational approach and very respectful approach to help the individuals who were brave enough to offer themselves to the show as participants for us to come in. My role, just to backtrack, my role is an on-air expert, and I'm one of the therapists on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the episodes that I've shot, I work as the therapist alongside a professional organizer to work on my role, obviously the mental health blocks, because hoarding disorder is very much a mental health disorder, a mental health issue. And the organizer, of course, works on tools, tips, strategies, and ways to declutter and stay like stop hoarding. And it's an incredibly condensed, in a very short period of time, to come in and really like pull up a lot of things. And it was very important to be respectful and very delicate in how we do that, because if you can imagine 4 or 5 days of shooting, and working with these individuals, but we are in a very quick period of time digging down to some very deep pain points for these
Right.
people that may have contributed to this hoarding disorder. So I mean, it was quite a privilege to be part of helping them, but it was also an incredible opportunity to help educate people who really don't understand what hoarding
Mm-hmm.
disorder is. Like sitting there as I was once upon a time, scratching my head thinking, why don't they just throw that plastic bag away? It's a dirty plastic bag. Or like that's a cereal box that's 20 years old, cereal box that's empty, there's nothing in it. Why are they keeping it? So like to really understand that the logic and reasoning, there is no logic and reasoning, and to really destigmatize what hoarding disorder is, so that people watching can understand as well.
Well,
Yeah.
Natasha, congratulations on your on-air success, your off-air success, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. It was a very nice conversation.
Take care.